Question. Dear Kim, can you please say something more about alcohol addiction? For 20 years I have followed your teachings, and for 20 years I haven't overcome my alcohol addiction. What have I missed? Capital letters. Okay. Well, I haven't been addicted to anything in this lifetime, at least nothing physical. Perhaps I was addicted to being seen as a good person. But so because I haven't been inside the consciousness and looked through that filter that causes people to be addicted, I may not be the best person to comment on this. So if you don't feel this hits home, then seek out somebody who's been there and who maybe knows more about what you're going through. But on the other hand, what is it that causes an addiction? It's a psychological condition. And as I've explained in many of my videos, the psychological conditions, at least the ones that are not constructive, are these subconscious selves that we have. And I have, of course, had many of these subconscious selves that I've overcome. I still have some I'm working on overcoming. So from that point, I have been inside the consciousness. So what I would say here is that, what have I missed? Well, it may sound trivial, but what you have missed is making the decision to stop drinking alcohol. May sound trivial, but it's actually the deeper reality here. You have to make a decision to stop. And the question is, don't get me wrong here, I'm not saying that you need to force yourself with the outer mind. This is what I see a lot of people do, for example, in AA. They go into this program, and I'm not in any way knocking AA. I think it has helped an awful lot of people. But they try to suppress the urge to drink. And what I'm saying is, instead of making a decision with the outer mind to suppress the urge to drink, you need to ask yourself, where does the urge come from in the first place? And it comes from one of these subconscious selves. And then you have to be willing to do the psychological work, look at yourself, perhaps find a therapist who has experience with addiction. Look at your psychology until you uncover what is, there's usually more than one self. What are the separate selves that causes you to drink and want to drink and feel you need to drink? What is it doing for you? What is drinking doing for you? And if I understand it based on people I've talked to, part of drinking is that it gives you a relief. But a relief from what? From your own state of mind. Some psychological condition that you find it difficult to deal with. And it makes it difficult for you to deal with life. So you could say that, for example, in my case, when I was younger, I was very, very shy. And if I did or said something that I thought other people didn't like, I would feel very embarrassed. And it would be hard for me. So this could be something that could cause people to drink because they get a relief from this sense of being embarrassed or not being good enough. It could be all kinds of other things, of course. So you need to discover what it is for you. What is the condition that the drinking gives you a relief from? And then you need to look at what are the subconscious selves that are causing this condition, are causing this reaction in you. And you need to keep going at it until you realize that at the bottom of it all is a subconscious self that was created in a certain very difficult traumatic situation, most likely in past lives. Could go all the way back to what I talked about in my avatar videos with the birth trauma of first coming to Earth. But there was a difficult situation, and you, in order to deal with that situation, you created a subconscious self. And that subconscious self was based on a decision. You made a decision. And that decision was based on an illusion that this was the only way you could react in that situation. It wasn't the only way, it was the only way you could see at the time. So what you have to do is uncover this mechanism. And you come to the point where you see the decision, you see the illusion, and you decide I don't want to react this way anymore. I don't believe in this solution. I don't believe this is my only way to react. I see there's another way to react, and that is how I want to react. And this is not a decision that comes with the outer mind. It's a decision that comes spontaneously from within when you have attained this resolution of the subconscious self, the dysfunctional pattern, the dysfunctional psychology. And that's what I'm saying. This is the difference between forcing yourself with the outer mind and resolving psychology so you spontaneously decide to go higher. And so the question says, I've been in these Ascended Master teachings for 20 years. What have I missed? Well, this is what you missed. This very dynamic, that the teaching of the Ascended Masters is not about making decisions with the outer mind, forcing yourself to suppress something. The teachings of the Ascended Masters, as they are given through me, are all about going into the psychology and resolving the psychology that pulls you away from, basically from oneness with your higher self, but also pulls you into these dysfunctional patterns, such as drinking or whatever it may be. So I would say that's the one thing that you missed. But it's not too late. If you get it now, apply it, do something about it, explore it. Now I don't know this person, so I would say, well, what have you done then to overcome the alcoholism? Have you done what other people do? Have you gone into counseling, therapy? Have you applied the teachings that the Ascended Masters have given about these subconscious selves? I have the book called Healing Your Spiritual Traumas, which talks about it. There are several other books in that series, but it gives specific techniques for overcoming or uncovering these subconscious selves so you can see them. And so have you applied those? You could also say, on a more general term, an addiction is always connected to, there's a collectively created entity in a collective consciousness. And there's a very powerful alcohol entity on earth that seeks to pull on people's emotional bodies and even mental bodies to get them to drink. Even the identity body, because you can identify yourself as an alcoholic. So have you then applied the Master's teachings, invoked spiritual protection, invoked the violet flame to consume the energies that have been accumulated in your energy field so you can see these separate cells more clearly? In other words, have you really applied the teachings? Have you just studied the teachings loosely? Have you really applied it? Because I would have to say that if you really have applied the teachings, after 20 years you should have overcome this. And that's why I'm suspecting that this mechanism I'm talking about, that you haven't actually seen it. And I'm not trying to blame you, I'm just saying, because if you look at even previous Ascended Master teachings, they were much more focused on disciplining the mind. So there are people from those organizations who would say, well, you need to suppress the urge to drink. And this is also what they say in AA, you need to suppress it. And they even say in AA, as far as I understand it, you see yourself as an alcoholic for life. And that's why I'm saying that's certainly a limitation, because you want to come to a point where you resolve these subconscious selves. And that means you've shifted your sense of identity. For you, the new spiritual being that you see yourself as, drinking isn't even an option. You don't even have to choose not to do it, because you are spontaneously choosing something else, and it's just, it becomes obsolete. It's not even an option anymore. And that's the power of transformation, where you literally resolve enough psychology that it shifts your sense of identity. I would also have to say here that it might help to consider this, what I've talked about in several videos, that we all have a life plan, especially if we're spiritual people. We have a life plan we create before we come into embodiment. And this life plan has two aspects. One is what we want to overcome in our psychology. In other words, the growth we want, how high of a level of consciousness we want to reach among the 144. And then the creative aspect of our divine plan, the contribution we want to make. And so you need to tune into that, try and tune into that, and see what is your divine plan? What is the higher potential you have? And then come to that point where you can make that choice. Do I really want to let this drinking stand in the way of my fulfilling my highest potential? But in order to come to that point, you really have to do, as what I said, resolve these selves. But it can help you, motivate you to look at your divine plan. I would also have to say that for spiritual people, and obviously the person asking the question, you're a spiritual person, or you wouldn't have followed the Ascended Master teachings, you wouldn't even be asking the question. So, the creative aspects of our divine plan means, in part, attaining and demonstrating a higher state of consciousness. We can call it personal Christhood, which is the term the Ascended Masters often use. Christ is a universal term, as I've said many times. So, but we have these subconscious selves that are resisting us not only attaining the Christhood, but especially expressing it. I know many, many spiritual people who have followed spiritual teachings for a long time. And they have a very good understanding. They have resolved a lot of psychology. But they are very, very reluctant to express themselves, to go out and do something, to expose themselves to ridicule and opposition. I had to deal with that myself in 2002 before I was able and willing to do what I've been doing for the Ascended Masters now since then. So I understand it's a difficult initiation. So all I'm saying here is that I have seen it in myself and in other people, how people can have various mechanisms in their psychology that basically, to be direct, serves as an excuse for not expressing your Christhood. And alcoholism can be one of them. You know, is it just an excuse because you have a higher potential, but as long as you're drinking, you don't express it, you can't express it. So that's another consideration, you know. So I hope these three things I mentioned can give you some food for thought that can help you make this shift, because obviously you haven't made the shift that you need to make in order to stop the drinking. Do you really see the drinking as a problem? Can be another consideration. Or do you just think it's something you can live with? You know, I see people who smoke pot on a regular basis, and they think, oh, I can be a spiritual student, I can study Ascended Master teachings and smoke pot. Of course you can, but you can't express your Christhood and reach your highest potential if you smoke pot on a regular basis, or if you drink on a regular basis. It just can't be done. I mean, it's like this, you know, what the ego will try to do, and I've talked about this. I just did a video on the ego's survival games, and this is one survival game of the ego. You know, it is to get you to be in this state of consciousness where you're doing something physical, like the physical addiction, that prevents you from expressing your Christhood. But you don't see it, because the ego is so good at coming up with this serpentine logic that just, oh, it's not so bad, I have it under control, it's not really harming my spiritual growth, it's okay that I enjoy myself once in a while and get drunk or smoke pot or do whatever. Oh, it's okay, I'll gradually get there. And, you know, yes, the spiritual path is a gradual path. And yes, for a time, you can grow gradually, step by step. But there are certain stages on a spiritual path where you have to make a binary choice. It's like Jesus said 2,000 years ago, you know. There comes a point where you have to make the choice to follow the world or to follow Christ. And that's where Jesus said, he who seeks to save his life shall lose it, but he who is willing to lose his life for my sake shall find eternal life. He who seeks to save his earthly life or thinking, oh, I can continue to do this, it's not so bad, it's okay, and I can still make spiritual progress. You're going to lose it in the end, because you're not going to make the progress you wanted to make, and you're not going to express your Christhood, and you're going to go out of embodiment, and you're going to look back at your life, and you're going to look at your divine plan, and you're going to see this whole creative aspect of my divine plan I never got to because I was getting stoned or getting drunk. So what I'm saying is there comes a point where you have to make an either-or choice. And it's not so much about the outer things, it's about thinking that you can make spiritual progress without making these choices. I have in my ego discourse talked about death decisions and life decisions. And there comes a point where you have to make a life decision. This is enough. But as I said, a life decision is not the outer mind forcing yourself or suppressing something. Life decisions are when we look at our psychology, look for these subconscious selves, look at the decisions we made in the past, and make a higher decision based on our higher awareness that we've attained. So I hope this helps you in some way.